When you come on, Lisa, be sure to change your name. You're coming on as ANC 3G, if you have a case.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, so I guess we can go on it. Sorry, I'm running late. I couldn't get my Zoom connection and I had to do a last minute stop for the family. But we pretty much what I want to do, hopefully we can go over the two documents that are before us in terms of the finalizing the survey. Bruce, you sent yours around around 3 o'clock this afternoon?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then you have my final, which I sent like on Sunday or so. So with that, Bruce, I did not have a chance to like in-depth review your document. But I did look at the questions. And I think maybe to make this efficient, we should discuss which questions we have changes to from your document. Which it seems like there's a couple.
Yeah. So shall I just do a quick overview for folks who don't have the background on the call?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the document that Lisa had created previously was a compilation of questions that commissioners had submitted along with additional text, introductory background text and so forth that we have been discussing for the last week, 2 weeks. And towards getting us to a place where we would have a document that we actually could put into the field, I took a stab with advice and counsel from the consultants on a draft. This is the second draft that I've done. And this one built on the compilation that Lisa had. So what I've produced is a document with 12 substantive questions. 4 of those are about people's views concerning the proposed redevelopment of the community center and library. I include in those 4 a question we discussed last time, which is one related to nearby sites, other proposed redevelopment on Connecticut Avenue from Livingston to Chevy Chase Circle. I then include 3 questions about affordable housing. They're the same ones we discussed previously. They have to do with the amount of affordable housing that would be at the civic site, the percentage of overall housing that would be affordable, the percentage of affordable housing that would be 2 and 3 bedroom units for families, and then the affordability question, which is to say, which target populations are we most concerned about as a community at various percentages of median family income. So those are 3 affordable housing related questions in addition to the general questions which I mentioned. And then there are 5 design questions, 3 of which are the questions we've seen numerous times that take what DEMPAD had fielded and use those for reasons of sort of standardization, comparability.
Recording in progress.
And that makes up the 12 questions. Now, in addition to that, I have tweaked the intro so that we are reaching out and engaging people, encouraging people to take the survey. I have tweaked the backgrounder that is optional reading that we would link to and put it into a Q&A format to make it more readable. And then packaged all that up as a survey document. So that's the overview. Now, the idea here is also to try to adhere to some of what we had discussed early on, which is to have a survey that people could complete in 10 minutes. We had no magical number of questions, but 10 to a dozen, something we talked about. So I stuck to a dozen. The demographic questions build in what we also talked about, which is questions on gender and race, using, and thanks to Steve Connors for giving us the standard formulation from the US Census that they use at the VA. So we're looking at standard statements for gender and race. So there are 9 demographic questions, which is at the upper range of the number that we had talked about, but we've discussed this many times. And so we said we would try to go with that. So 12 substantive questions, 9 demographic, a short intro, and then that backgrounder for people who want additional context. And that backgrounder goes into affordable housing, the history of the project. It has lots of embedded links and so forth and so on. Couple of things, which I put in my note to the commissioners today, and I'll mention it for everybody on the call. Many people are likely to take this survey on a phone. So when they take a survey on a phone, like anything else that you're going to read on a phone, it is important to minimize text, certainly minimize long text, so that people don't feel they're wading through a lot of material. We also, again, want people to be able to get through this expeditiously. So I've had sort of those kind of overall design criteria in mind. So Lisa, Peter, and others, that's kind of the overview. Now we can go into specific questions. These questions, however, are ones we've seen before. The only different question was the one about adjacent sites or nearby sites. And based on the conversation last time, Peter's concerns in particular, I completely redid that question.
Well, let me stop you there, because there are some differences. We do have some differences in the wording of these questions. They may be the same question, Bruce, but in all honesty, if it's worded different, we need to review that. So, and because it was sent out at the time that it was sent out, I did not have a chance to go word by word and verify what was changed versus what remained the same from my version 5. So let's start with question 1. And I think we should go, and I'll get on the background information in the letter after this. The most important thing is the survey questions. Demographic questions, me and Peter Gosselin talked about that. And Peter, were you okay with the demographic questions as presented?
I'll live with them. I think there are too many, but I'll live with them.
Which ones are your main concern?
I just think that we could, you early on have said that you were restraining yourself in asking about race, but if we were going to ask about gender and others, you wanted race, and I completely understand that. I would lose 7, 8, and 9. I also think that if we ask the question of own or rent, number 3, we know we basically capture 98% of whether people live in a house or an apartment, so we could lose 2. You know, I am vividly aware that we can't, we've talked a lot about those. Those are not where the hard stuff is. So I'll live with the 9 questions as is, although I do think that it's too many. So in any case, I think we ought to get on to the substance stuff.
Okay, but what I'm going to do, we definitely can get onto the substance, but we have to give an accurate and full report to the ANC. So on demographics, you're okay, but you could lose 7, 8, and 9, and then question 2. Because you believe 3 captures the majority of rent and own.
The rent own captures the majority of house apartment.
Right. Okay. Bruce, you want to respond to that?
No, just very quickly. I'm not wedded to the demographics. I was trying to reflect what I thought people wanted to include, so I put it in there. We can go back to that. One thing to keep in mind, we're going to test this, right? So we can run the test with maybe a few more of these demographic questions, just see how long it takes people and then amend from there. But anyway, we can move forward.
Okay, so let's go to question number 1. Bruce, was there any change on the wording on that?
Yeah, it's essentially the same question. It is in the current formulation. I'll just read it. In accordance with the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan, the city is proposing to redevelop the Chevy Chase Community Center and library site to include affordable housing. Which response below best expresses your view about the initiative? Okay. So that essentially is the same question. It's worded a little bit differently. And then the response categories are, I support the redevelopment of the community center library site to include affordable housing. I support redevelopment of only the community center library. I do not support any redevelopment of the site. And then I added a category here, which is a response category. I do not feel sufficiently informed to have a view. And then finally, I have no preference on redevelopment of the site. That about not feeling sufficiently informed gets at something we've talked about. We had a couple of questions suggested previously about, do you feel informed? How well informed are you about X, Y, or Z? So I thought it might be worthwhile to include this as a response category for those people who, frankly, don't think they know enough. So that's the question and the response categories.
Okay. Let's see. I don't have an issue with in accordance with the small area plan. That's very minor.
It can be per the Chevy Chase small area plan. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about that. But on the first one, I definitely want to link it to the DMPED. So that link that I included actually links the audience to what DMPED or the city is trying to do. And if you look at that link and you look at the wording, that's the wording that I copied. So it's, yes, redevelop the community center and library to include affordable housing, but it's more accurately described on the website. Redevelopment of this site shall include new public facilities to replace the recreation center and library, as well as residential units, including affordable and senior housing. So that's a big difference that the city has put up. And this one, I feel pretty strongly that we need to use the language that's reflected in the city's website.
Okay, so two things about that. One, for our conversation, I totally take the point about the language that you just cited. In the course of our conversations with the community and with ourselves, senior housing for seniors, at least in my recollection, has not been a prominent discussion point. We've talked about a senior center that's in the community center, facilities for seniors, and so forth. So that's a change or a difference, and maybe it's something we always overlooked. I don't know.
Well, let me suggest something here. Lisa, would it be acceptable to you if we change the wording in Bruce's to I support the plan, add the plan with your link, and then to make that concept, then make it to redevelop the community center and library to include, and use the rest of Bruce's wording. The reason I suggest this is that I do agree with Bruce that we need to keep these very, very sparse sentences, the verbiage of DMPED's verbiage seems to me to go on, and it's going to be the
yeah. I can cut this short. If we want to include the plan, as long as we include that link, I'm okay with changing the sentence.
Then let me just ask about, I do not feel sufficiently informed.
Yeah, I want to grab it too.
Where does that get us? I mean, what do we want that for? I mean, let's say people say they're not sufficiently informed. At this stage of the game, we're running up against our RFP process. I mean, where does that get us? Where we with something that we can do something about? I guess this is addressed to Bruce.
Well, it's a good question, Peter. The other way of looking at this is, when people take this survey, are they going to see themselves in it? Are they going to find a response category that matches where they are? That's kind of how I approach this, as opposed to thinking about what we would do with it. I guess what we would do with it would be to recognize that X number of people just weren't able to participate in this question really because I just didn't have enough information.
I'm not gonna go on my short end.
Lisa, back to the plan. Something else though that I think we need to be careful about. In the intro, we do a link to the Chevy Chase small area plan. And in the backgrounder, we talk about the Chevy Chase small area plan because it is obviously the blueprint for all of this. When we link in this question to another plan and you jump to that page, there's only that page. There's no plan there. It's just language,
Yeah.
what it is.
I agree, but I think that language is important, Bruce. And if that is what the city has as its starting point, the agency that's doing the development, we'd be remiss not to share that with the community. So that is what they have, and I would think that is what we want to hold them to. If they're saying in their intro that this is going to be affordable and senior housing, that's a big difference than just affordable. I mean, we're talking about a whole nother category of affordable housing there. So I think however we do that, we need to frame this for the community so that they have the full bucket of information.
But again,
and that is what they're basically saying. So
I don't disagree with that because I've read it. I jumped to that site and I saw it.
okay.
But the thing about it is that correct me if I'm just haven't focused on this, but senior housing just has not been in the conversation. Whatever Democrats say,
Yeah, I'm not saying that you're incorrect about that. What I'm saying is we're not going to hold that off the table because it hasn't been in the conversation. And since DMPEG put that on its website and already made a commitment to that quasi, I would think that the ANC and the community would want to hold them to that.
Okay, and Bruce, if the word is bothering you, is plan, because we have the word plan in the intro, we have the word plan in the backgrounder, and let's change that to proposal. But let's, I mean, this is a compromise that reduces the verbiage of the option and still gives people the opportunity to see the DMPED language, and so to tie it to the DMPED.
Okay. So Peter, then what we need to do though, again, is to reflect that language in the question, because the question can't just say affordable if it also actually means senior. So, we're going to have to say to include affordable and senior housing, and then modify the response categories accordingly if we're going to do this correctly.
Well, we can do that. I don't have an objection of doing that.
Okay.
If that's what you want to do, or we could just link to to me, which is easy. I mean, senior housing is a type of affordable housing. It's just a subcategory of affordable housing. Just like low income is a subcategory of affordable housing, as well as extremely low income. We don't have those in there as well. So we can do it as, however we want to really do this.
Okay. Well, Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at the question and thinking, there's an important distinction, it says in accordance with blah, blah, the city is proposing to redevelop the site to include affordable housing. How about, to include residential housing, some of which will be affordable, and some of which, some designated as affordable and some for seniors or something like that. Because I think what we're missing in the question as is that it sounds like to include affordable housing. No, it's to include residential housing, some of which is affordable, right?
Yes, that's true.
Because otherwise it could be misleading. I'm just thinking somebody may think that it's all affordable housing when you look at that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, we can reword the question to match the city's explanation, if you want to call it that, or description. we can certainly do that. My goal is just to make sure that we kind of leverage that, as well as, inform the community of what the city has, on its own website proposed, which is residential, to include affordable and senior. So
So-
I don't object to that.
So one other thought, just brainstorming here, is that if you take a look again at the note that I included at the top of the survey about affordable housing, drawing on the standard official statements about what it is that we all are familiar with, we could perhaps add a line there, Lisa, to reflect that affordable housing includes these different categories.
Yeah, I think you could do that, Bruce, but I think we need to include the senior housing, because you know what? That's going to affect answers. Let's just be for real. I mean, if people think that they have a chance of senior housing on that site, they're going to be more probably supportive of the redevelopment. And I would think, being in Ward 3, which has very few senior housing opportunities, that the community and the ANC would want to support that. If that's what DMPED is going to build there, we want to push for as much senior housing as possible. So I think that needs to be in the question, not just an outlier. I'm not gonna, as Gosselin said, this is one I'm not gonna give on. I'm not gonna put that very critical piece of information on the sidebar.
But this is Steve. There's a big difference between someone supporting affordable housing and someone affording senior living. It's going to need, if you're going to do that, you got to break it out and get a whole new stem of questions going, so you can analyze the responses.
No, I don't.
How
I agree.
are you going to break it out?
Senior housing is a subcategory of affordable. It is a subcategory. We are not doing a stem of questions on low income housing. We're not doing a stem of questions on 30 to 50 to 80%. All of that is affordable housing. It's all affordable housing.
But I remind my colleagues that we have a dozen questions to get through, and we are really on a tight deadline.
I've offered to amend this question by, I offered to take your friendly amendment. I further offered to track the language that DMPED has mentioned. I'm not willing to take the senior out of here because that is what DMPED has on its site.
So Bruce, how about this? It's in accordance with the small area plan, the Chevy Chase small area plan. The city is proposing to. I support the proposal to redevelop the community center and library site to include housing, some of which will be affordable and for senior use
Okay. Okay.
And I recede on the question of I do not feel sufficiently. I do not feel sufficiently informed. We'll leave that.
Okay.
You okay with that, Lisa?
Yeah, because that one actually kind of tracks the original second question we had, which is I support the redevelopment in principle, but I have questions or concerns. It's not a far stretch from that one.
Okay.
It doesn't mention, the concerns, which is what Commissioner Nash really wanted us to focus in on. So if Commissioner Nash was here, I think he would probably oppose that. But we already also decided that we weren't going to do open-ended questions, and his follow-up to that was to list what the concerns potentially were. So I think this is a good compromise between all of the positions.
Okay, there are various folks who've got comments here, Lisa.
Let's go with Cal, then Andrea.
So I just heard some proposed wording that said residential housing. I don't think that hits it. I think, and some of which is blah, 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 blah. If we're talking specifically about only affordable housing, some of which is senior, then I think that should be the wording of it, because I think the amount of opposition to housing that is not affordable and not senior is going to kill this. And I don't understand why we're saying any residential housing that's not affordable and not senior is even being considered.
Because Cal, that is the language on DMPED's website. I will show you the link and you can click on it. They clearly state residential, and it's just what I read. As well, they said new public facilities to replace the recreation center and library, as well as residential units, including affordable and senior housing. That's exactly what's on the site.
That's too bad. I mean, that's really sad. I have
Well,
to say that. I mean,
I don't think it's sad. I think it's realistic, and I think it's what's going to happen on the site. I mean,
to have any market rate stuff on there, I think there's a lot of people who are going to be offended by.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. But I mean, the city, I mean, I don't know if the city is in a
Unless the
position
survey
to
breaks
develop
it down and
100%.
says, are you in favor of affordable housing? Are you in favor of senior housing? And I think Steve was just talking about having, a separate way of tracking those things because, and so forth. I mean, well, let's see how the first draft comes out, but
Okay, let's go to Andrea.
The language is not totally clear on the DMPED site that the housing for seniors is affordable housing for seniors. If that is definitely the case, I think it has to be worded something like some of which is affordable housing, including affordable housing for seniors. Because otherwise it just sounds like it's, I've forgotten, Northwest Village or something, Northwest Seniors Village or whatever, like it's just for seniors, but not affordable. So
Yeah.
it's.
I agree. I mean,
Explicit.
yeah, I agree with you. I think we should just track the language that's on the site, which really says affordable, including affordable and senior housing.
Okay, but that's not senior housing at market rate. That's affordable senior housing. I mean, I'm just saying it, I don't think it's clear to someone who doesn't know the field that the senior housing is affordable housing, a subset.
Right.
So,
We have to make that clear. Otherwise, it does look like it's a senior, all of a sudden, a senior facility.
right. Like, no.
Okay, so we'll try to get the question wording right based on the DMPED piece that we just talked about. So we'll have another go at that. Lisa, Peter? We've got the response, okay with the response categories?
Yeah, and I think, Gosselin, what do you want to add to that on that wording?
To what? We talking about two now, or are we still on one?
We're still on one, and Andrea, well, Cal had some comments and Andrea had some comments. Andrea's comments was, to clarify that she does not think the way it's worded on DMPED's site distinguishes that it's affordable senior housing.
But then it seems to me that we leave it. I mean, if we are saying the proposal and we're linking the proposal, we say it's includes housing, some of which is affordable and some for senior use or some senior housing, and leave it open about whether it's affordable senior housing, because DMPED is, I mean, right? And we're talking about the way this option is the way we're going with this option is saying, I support the proposal that you can see at the DMPED site. So if it's unclear in the DMPED site, I think we just leave it that way, because I mean,
The thing is, guys, we've got to be clear with the community about what this is. It can't just be senior housing and not.
Yeah.
I will call DMPED tomorrow and clarify it. That'll make it easy. I'll clear it with DMPED tomorrow.
But if it comes about, to clarify, if it comes about that this project has become a project for senior housing, it's not.
I don't think that's what it is.
All right. Okay.
I really don't
move on. Question 2.
Is there any changes with your question 2?
Yeah, the only change I see is that he takes the parenthetical, everything from for public uses, recreation benches, playgrounds, and so forth, which frankly I support as simplifying the language.
Question 2.
So question 2, Peter, has 4 response categories: new modernized community center, new modernized library, affordable housing, right? And then open green space.
The only change I see over Lisa's is Lisa's has outdoor green space for public uses, recreation benches, playgrounds, grass, and trees, which you removed, and I think it's sensible to remove. I think people, the category is open/green space. So I mean, I think that the question, as you have phrased it, is fine, and that two is one of the few places where we're gonna I think we can agree it's basically.
Yeah, let me go back to something on this survey. So we kind of have, and I really would like to differentiate. We talked about this very, very early on, if you guys remember, about informing the public what we can do with the information we're getting. So the way that I organize this is general views on redevelopment of the site and then potential design elements. So that's gone out of Bruce's plan. And I do think it's really important to have those clarifying headers over those questions. It doesn't, and it also brings the reader back to our objectives and which question, because looking at this now, I kind of got confused with that. Because on the potential design elements, we say that this is the part of the survey where we intend to use the information to influence the RFP process. And we link them back to our RFP and how we intend to use that data. So I'm not sure, Bruce, if you want to talk about, before we go any further, why you took that out, because I think that's really important to leave in there.
Well, I guess because each of those headings has a big paragraph underneath it with lots of text.
No, it doesn't. It's not lots of text.
Well, I'm looking at it right here, Lisa.
Well, that's not lots of text to me. It's like 4 sentences, 4 or 5 sentences. To me, that's not lots of text.
Okay, but when you do these surveys and someone's got a phone, we have to really be mindful to minimize the text. We have to simplify to the maximum extent possible. And so I just find, frankly, the headings kind of getting in the way because some of these questions cut across. I frankly don't think they're necessary. I think they get in the way, and I think the explanatory material, I don't know that people need all this information to answer these questions. It's really what they need to answer the questions, and are the questions straightforward and clear? That's kind of where I was coming from. But in any event, if you want to talk about that, we can. If we want to get to, and we're happy to come back to it. But if we're on question 2, if we want to try to work through this, are we good with question 2 the way it is, or do we need to do something?
Yeah, let's come back to that, because I do think it's important to put that in there, because that is a major part of the survey. And I think having the community clearly understand, I'm not so sure, most of the surveys that I've seen, and I can tell you from our MailChimp account, most things are read on the desktop. And I have stats for that. Most of it is not read on the phone. It's actually read on a desktop. So, and I don't want to sacrifice, knowledge and information for the sake of a 30-second read. But regarding this question, I don't have any, I think that's fine the way you have it, just open green space. I don't have any concern with that.
I don't have a problem either saying with recreational facilities, just to make it simple, that there's more than open green space. It doesn't matter. We can, either way on that.
Get an agreement where we get one, huh?
No, talk to me.
What did you say, Peter? I didn't hear you.
Let's take an agreement where we got one. We got a lot to cover here. So, I think just open/green space works.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
No,
Michelle? Michelle, go on.
Yeah, I hate to ruin your agreement, but I think it's really important to include recreation facilities because a lot of people may not really know what's on that site and may not, recognize there's a basketball court there, pickleball courts. I think at least need to include the outdoor recreational space facilities.
So
I don't have a problem.
why don't we say this? Open/green space with recreational facilities. Okay.
With or and recreational.
Or maybe-
facilities.
Okay. And with, yeah.
And I have another question. Again, this is hard because we don't see the whole thing. You mentioned there's an intro to this. Does that talk about what DemPed is currently planning to do in terms of, they're talking about 80-foot tall buildings, taking up 80% of the lot. Do people read that before they start answering the questions?
Go ahead if you want to answer that, Lisa. My answer is that we got to be very careful, Michelle, with too much upfront stuff because people aren't going to wade through all that. They're going to get into it and they're going to go, bang, this is too much. I don't want to take the time to do this.
Well,
yeah, we didn't include that. Well, the other thing is we don't really know right now what that's going to look like because I know Office of Planning is still making adjustments to lot coverage. I mean, we don't know that. And we certainly can't put that in the intro because it's just an unknown at this point in time.
Yeah, but I mean, people, oh boy, I mean, people may have, I talked to some gentleman once who's like, yeah, I think it's okay to put housing there. You can put 1 story and have 10 units. That's what he thought, was a possibility. And it's not at all what you're talking. It's just, yeah, it sounds great if you don't realize it's going to be these tall buildings and take up 80% of the space. I don't know. This is a bit of a problem here.
Yeah, well, I think part of that is going to be this, I don't want to put that in the opening. Bruce made some good points, but I think just bottom line is we just don't know. We will see that after zoning comes through with some of their final proposals and if that's accepted and then with what the developers,
Yeah, but but this survey, you're getting people's opinions on do you want housing here or not? And
yeah,
I assume that'll be before zoning comes through.
Well, and I think part of your point, part of what you're talking about is part of why I am saying those intro paragraphs into the sections is so critical because you are going to get people that are going to say, well, what about this? What about that? Those introductory paragraph, even though, it's a short blurb, but it pretty much says where this information is going to go and what it's going to be used for, to help with the influence the RFP process or to provide general views about the public site that we can use, to come back to the agencies and the council with. So I get you. I don't necessarily agree with the full concept of providing all that information, but my kind of, middle ground to what you were saying was kind of an introductory paragraph before we talk about the design elements to kind of help the community know just kind of, where we are, because we don't have that anywhere. Actually, now that you're saying that is absent from the survey. So you got people kind of taking a survey that don't realize, oh, okay, there's an RFP process coming. How do I, participate in that? Or what is this information going to be used for? That was kind of my happy medium to that.
Just to be clear here, guys, there is an entire 1-page backgrounder that has all of that in it.
Yeah.
So but I think it's not missing. It's all there if somebody wants to click on the link and read it. But if you put that stuff up front, a lot of people aren't going to wade through it. They can do it as an option.
Right. And I think the other
Okay, let's move on to who's next on I'm sorry, who was that? Was that
the goal of survey questionnaire design is to keep it short and simple so people can get through it. If they want to read about things, you can have some background information in the back or the front. You don't want to slow people down. And I disagree. I think a lot of these are going to be taken electronically.
I agree.
Offering my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I definitely respect that, Steve. But I think we also have to do what we know what works for our community. And we know our community is going to read this stuff. I mean, we know our community is going to read a paragraph. They're going to do that. They are going to take this survey, regardless of whether it takes them 10 or 20 minutes. They're going to do it.
But that information is already there at different points. It doesn't need to be, you never want to have a paragraph long question before you ask a question. It just
And
doesn't work.
we don't have any paragraph long questions. We have none of those. Okay, so let me go to
Well,
Ron.
there's something on the affordability level. The city's request for proposals for the redeveloped community center is about at least a paragraph long.
Okay, we'll get there. Let me go to Ron and Andrea.
I was just gonna, excuse me. I was just gonna weigh in. I totally agree with Michelle on referencing the recreational use there, because that also sends a message when this questionnaire goes to DEMPED about what people had in mind when they responded. So I think that's important. As far as the background stuff, I honestly agree pretty much with Lisa. I think the more information we can give people, the better. I've argued this a long time. I understand the experts are saying one thing, but I think sacrificing information for brevity is not the right way to handle this neighborhood, since there's so much misinformation already out there.
I agree.
Not
100%
about
agree.
with the headers. I mean, we need to ask people the question as free and clear as we possibly can. And this, I agree with Bruce. The headers, I'm agnostic about the ones Lisa has, but we can't use them as information the delivery tools. We'll never get a survey of this.
Just again, guys, there's the background and an express link for people to read it. It's
Exactly.
not.
I mean, what we're talking about right now is question 2. I mean, we kind of gotten off on something else. We're talking about question 2, open green space with recreational facilities. We haven't changed or talked about changing anything in this question but that.
No, I agree. Okay, let's go to question 3. I think we're in agreement on question 2.
Yeah. We said we would come back.
Question 3. This is the one about other sites, right? And so it's question 3. Do you support?
And Bruce's, you're 6.
So the question, Lisa, again, that you had in your survey, yours is a compilation of everybody's questions. So I had a question previously about nearby or adjacent sites. We discussed it last time. Peter gave his feedback on it. And so now I'm proposing a much simpler question, number 3 on the draft that I've given you guys. And that's what I'm myself right now focused on.
Okay.
It's
one of the things, so what's making this a little difficult is you've cut out my question 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Well, there are some of those questions are moved around, Lisa.
Okay, so
but I mean,
so that I can track what you're doing. Can you tell me? So we'll have to come back. Why don't we do this? Why don't we just come back to my 2, 3, 4, and 5? If there's somewhere else on your survey, let me know.
Okay.
But your question 3 is what question on mine? 6?
Yeah.
And your 6, Lisa, is a previous version of a question Bruce proposed.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I know that. Okay.
All right. So what I'm proposing now with respect to nearby sites is a new version, which is much simpler. And it reads as follows, for folks who don't have this in front of them. Do you support the inclusion of affordable housing in redevelopment elsewhere along the 4 blocks of Connecticut Avenue from Livingston Street to Chevy Chase Circle, as also proposed in the Chevy Chase Small Area Plan? Yes, no, I have no opinion. This question is meant to work with question number 1, in that we have heard from many people in the community about their views with regard to housing at both the site and then housing elsewhere. And we've heard, of course, from Councilmember Furman about, in his view, in his February letter and other things he said since, the importance of considering nearby or adjacent sites. So this is simply a straightforward question asking people if they're supportive of that.
I guess the suggestion I'd have here is that it include the fact that the question include the fact that the city has a plan to produce a substantial additional amount of affordable housing in Ward 3 and in the city as a whole, and so that we ask that question in that context. I'm trying to look at the question as Lisa had it, as Lisa's document has it.
So I think, to me, this is just too watered down. I go back to Ron, I go back to Michelle, and just, it is so watered down. And this yes or no doesn't really do too much for us as an ANC in trying to give information to DMPED in terms of affecting, what a community preference is. If we ask the community, like the options here, I support exploring other acquisition options to create new RFPs intended to increase affordable housing in addition to, but then we also say I support exploring other acquisition options to create new RFPs intended to increase affordable housing instead of the redevelopment. And then the option of that I support moving forward with the redevelopment of the community center and library without exploring. We have a lot more, those answers to me give the ANC a lot more wiggle room in saying, DMPED, here are some options, or here is the preferences for our community when it comes to adjacent site. To me, this is not a yes or no binary choice. That's just my personal opinion.
Lisa, the problem,
question and the responses are too watered down.
the problem,
I'm not sure they're watered down. They reflect good survey design practice, but
And you know what? They might, Steve, I agree. And please let me recognize you first, because Commissioner Gosselin was actually talking when you intervened. But I also asked the survey experts to respect the knowledge of the commissioners that have been on a commission. This will be my second term, Commissioner Gosselin's second term, and really knowing the community and some of the preferences that they may have. And we know that this community, I know my constituents are going to want more information than, what is kind of reflected in this question. And having that information is not going to bother them or deter them from taking a survey. Go on, Peter, what you were saying.
the problem I have is that the second option on the one in your document invites people to say, oh, let's look elsewhere and not community center library. And while in another world that might be a reasonable option, I don't think it is in this world. I think realistically, the city is gonna what I think we hope to encourage the city to do is to think more broadly about more than just the community center, but saying instead of is just a complicated way of saying no to the community center library that we developed. And so
well, we have that in both. We have a no, a yes, and a no in both options.
No, I know.
I mean, okay. Duh. I mean, but with this no, at least we can tell the city what they want. I mean, this just says, do you support or what does it say? Do you support inclusion of affordable housing elsewhere along the avenue? We have a little bit more leeway in the other ones. I mean, I think, Peter, we're going to have whether it's Bruce's no or my no, I mean, that is the option, right? Either they support it or they don't, or here's another caveat to it.
Well,
How would you change that?
Yeah, just to be clear, I wrote the former question and I was responding to Peter's your criticisms or comments. So I was trying to accommodate a simpler view. Here's how this could be used though. If people say on the first question that they don't support redevelopment of the site, but they do say in response to the third question that they support redevelopment along other places in the avenue, then at a minimum to a Fruman, you up the ante on having DEMPED include nearby or adjacent sites in the RFP.
Yeah, I think you get that, Bruce, with my version as well, with a more of an explanatory version of, you know, the issues around that.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
I'm just saying, you know, I'm not disagreeing with, you know, the basis of the question, the basis of the choices, yes, no, I have no opinion. I just don't think it's as detailed as we might want to have this particular one. So let me go to community while we're pondering. Andrea, then Ron.
I totally agree with Lisa. The question as it currently exists as number 3 is so vague as to be meaningless. I mean, if I were the person taking that survey, which I hope to be, I wouldn't even know how to answer it because I wouldn't know if you were asking, well, first of all, there will be affordable housing in the redevelopment of the rest of the avenue because the zoning type requires IZ plus, so there will automatically be affordable housing. So I would think, so what are they asking? So the delineating the separate choices, as Lisa suggested, seems to me absolutely essential. I thought the purpose of this survey was to get at community sentiment, not to make it conform to what OP or DEMPED has already prescribed. If we're going to do that, we may as well not do the survey.
Thanks, Andrea. Ron?
Well, I was concerned about how the question is received by DEMPED, and the first thing I was going to say was exactly what Andrea said, which was that there will be affordable housing on the avenue because of the existing zoning regulations. Even if the NC zones don't pass, anything that's built will still be subject to IZ. But the other thing is, I think in the way this question is asked, the key thing to DEMPED is that the library site is publicly owned and the other sites are privately owned. And the question has to be clear that what you're saying is that privately owned sites are added to or are proposed to be developed instead of this publicly owned site. That's the key from their point of view. So the question has to be informed by that.
Right. And that's what my version has. It distinguishes that and talks about the required housing on there. So, I mean, I get, Bruce, that we want to try to keep, but, you know, with this zoning and with this housing issue, these are not sometimes easily structured. Sometimes we have to provide the information.
Hey, Lisa, you're pushing on an open door. I wrote the previous question.
Okay, so then let's go.
Okay,
on.
so I'm fine.
Okay.
We're going to go back to it. Now, the only thing that I would try to get us to do, and this also gets at simplifying as much as we can, that the question frame for the one that we're talking about now that I had submitted previously, I think you added some things to that. We want to try to keep this as a paragraph lead into this thing. So if it all has to be there, okay, but it's just a lot of stuff.
So here are some suggestions of just phrase edits, right? So now I'm looking, Lisa, at your 6, okay? There are also privately owned properties on Connecticut Avenue between Livingston Street and Chevy Chase Circle, which, when developed by the property owners, cut with a comprehensive plan, just pick up, will be required to provide 20% of affordable housing, cut as established by city zoning regulations. What is your view about exploring options for the district to use public funds to acquire some of these private properties for housing along this stretch of Connecticut Avenue? So cut to issue additional RFPs intended to increase the potential for ... That way you at least shorten it by about 20 words, 20.
Okay, I made the edit on the first sentence you talked about. What was your edit on the second one? What is your view?
So after 20% affordable housing,
Yep, I got that.
we can wipe out as established. And then on the second sentence, after private properties, cut to issue additional RFPs intended to increase the potential for. I mean, it really, Lisa, this is a case where a survey taker is not going to say, "Oh, RFPs, oh, the potential." I mean, it's just, you know, it's. I mean, you're, you know.
Let me propose this, because wordsmithing this on the fly right now. Let's acknowledge this is the question you want to use, and let's go back and then rewrite it or write it, make the edits we need to make offline and come back, because we can be here till 9 o'clock on just this.
We're going to be here until 9 o'clock.
Okay, but I mean, just saying that I don't know that we can do this on.
So Peter, you're saying after RFPs.
No, after private properties, cut to issue additional RFPs intended to increase the potential for.
So then the question would be, what is your view about exploring options for the district to use public funds to acquire some of these properties?
Some of these private properties for housing along this stretch of Connecticut Avenue. Or for affordable housing along the stretch of Connecticut Avenue. It just takes out the process stuff, the RFP, the potential for increase. It leaves it to acquire some of these private properties for affordable housing along this stretch of Connecticut Avenue.
Okay, we can wordsmith it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So now where are we?
We're back. We've agreed this is the question to use as opposed to the alternative that I had suggested based on your prior comments, Peter. And now we're on to question 4.
You don't need to keep jamming me on that, Bruce. I get it.
I'm just saying. Okay. So on question 4 on the draft that I've submitted that I'm looking at, and this has to do with public impacts.
And this, Lisa, is the.
I think it's my number.
Yours is toward the end, 16.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 15.
So I don't think there's too much. The only thing, and I'm willing to throw it in there, I don't necessarily like, I took out, why did I take out transportation? Schools, parking.
You took out public safety.
And yeah, and transportation. I'm trying to think out, why did I take out transportation?
Yeah, why did you?
I think I combined I was trying to combine transportation and traffic. But I could see leaving them. I don't mind including your stuff in here. I mean, the way you have it.
Again, we can test this, and if it's too much, whatever, we amend it. But this is largely kind of the same. The only other thing we added to this, I've added to this based on the consultant's advice, is a category or response that is, I don't know. So if somebody just doesn't have any opinion on something, may not know about infrastructure, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
We give an option to say, I don't know. Otherwise, the response categories are the same.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Peter?
I'm fine. Yeah. I mean, there's some of it's little wording stuff like speeding. I don't think, I mean, I don't know why under traffic, that seems like a gratuitous ad, but it's fine. I'm not, it's all fine. Let's keep going.
All right. So the next 3 are about affordable
Yeah, and these are where he picks up some of yours, Lisa. He just moves in, they're your 3, 4, and 5, right?
I don't know. We have to go through it. Let's go. We
Right,
have
okay.
number 5.
All right, so the first question here that I'm referring to, my 5, is about the percentage of units in the redeveloped site that would be affordable units. And we give people, because we've heard people say, some people wish the whole thing to be affordable. Now, the city has indicated, as I understand it, that a minimum 30% of affordable units at the community center library site. That's what Joel Lawson told me last week.
That's true.
Okay, so we indicate that. That's the minimum. And so when we ask people to state their preferences, we don't say 10% because that's not on the table. 30%, 31 to 50%, 50 or more than 50%. And those are the responses. With I don't support any affordable housing as an obligatory one, I have no opinion.
Why did we take I support letting the market factors determine the percentage out? Well, there's a couple things. So we took out a lot of the background information, which explains the which I think gives a really good explanation on how it could be undertaken by a nonprofit or for-profit developer and the difference in the affordability levels. And recognizing that as the basis. So we're asking them to recognize kind of the process as the basis. And in this question, we don't even give them that process. They have no idea what that process is.
I do think Lisa is right that there's a problem. There's a motivational problem for the respondent, which is like, so the city's one says 30%. So who am I? You know, well, I mean, what is it? So it seems to me that another sentence that says at least another sentence that says something to the effect that there's been discussion that a nonprofit developer could do a lot, you know, do a larger fraction nonprofit, perhaps up to 100% or something like that. So you motivate people to take to give us a number by saying, you know, the option for more is available, which it doesn't right now. It sort of says the city's pegged the percentage at 30. What do you think? You know, without any kind of motivation for why they should think the same or different. So what about a sentence that says something like?
Well, that's in there. I mean, if you look at my version, I think it
No,
clearly.
I know. I'm just trying to shorten your version. That's all. I mean.
Well, I mean, if you have the part in there about the nonprofit provider, the project also, I mean, you got to have the two in there because it's the two realities. The nonprofit, which is a straight, simple sentence, and then the private developer using market rates to offset the costs. And then
Can I jump in with just an editorial thing as you guys move forward? And that is that all affordable project might be developed by a affordable housing provider who is a for-profit developer. That's J.R. Lynch, Somerset. Most of the developers who are doing these all affordable houses make a profit. They just have a different business plan than the usual market rate developer. So I think you just want to maybe call them affordable housing providers or something like that, just to be clear. Because they're not the same as like churches or faith-based nonprofits. They're a different animal.
So change by a nonprofit housing provider to affordable housing provider?
Yeah, I think so.
Andrea?
Oh,
Had your hand up.
right. Sorry. My concern is that, I mean, I guess in the past, the ANC has acknowledged that the community was really never consulted in any thoroughgoing fashion in developing its small area plan. And yet the small area plan and what DEMPED says it's going to do is continually referred to as the framework for this survey. Like, we cannot have opinions that are outside what they're gonna do. So I ask again, why are we even doing the survey? If they're gonna do what they're gonna do, why are we checking in with people to see what they would like to see their community be like?
So, Andrea, a couple of things about that. The survey gives people ample opportunity to say they don't support the development at all.
Yeah.
That's
Well, okay,
threshold
but-
question number one. In every one of the questions, there's a response category that acknowledges people might not support the development at all. And it allows them to say, again, I do not support the development, any redevelopment.
When you say the development, what does that mean? What if they support, the thing that we thought we were getting, which was a new community center and library? Is that
That's
the development?
That's in the first question, and there is a response category there that says, I support only redevelopment of the
Right.
community library.
Right, but further down, when you ask that question again, do you mean the exact same? I mean, what do you mean when you ask it again? Do you
Well, I
mean,
think you're at a bit of a disadvantage, Andrea, because you don't
I
have,
can't see it, right?
you don't have this in front of you.
Okay,
So, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, your points are well taken. We've tried to take those into account and make sure that the questions and the response categories are structured so as to allow people who don't support this at all to find a space to.
okay, well, when you say this at all, again, I ask you, what is this? I mean, okay, but I won't belabor that. But for instance, when you said, well, we shouldn't have an option of checking off 10% affordability because they've already told us 30% is the minimum. But, so much of what DEMPED says has to be taken with a grain of salt. One never really knows what's coming. And that even the reference to senior housing, that was put online sometime prior to spring 2023, because they thought that was when the RFP was going to be issued. At this point, they may not think senior housing is part of it. What I'm saying is it's in flux. So, but you're already shutting off potential opinions by aligning yourself with the powers that be.
Andrea, I just don't think that's a fair response. I mean, if you want us to add categories and say less than 30%, that would be fine. But if you look at the categories of, I'm sorry, you can't look at, but I mean,
I'm trying to paste it.
I mean,
I can give people a link to this version if they want a link, but we can't do it in the chat, right? Because people,
Okay.
we don't have an active chat.
There is a,
You can put it in the chat to everyone. You can put the link in there.
Okay, all right. So, all right, okay, let's see if I can do that.
so it seems like,
Go on, Andre.
I mean, maybe you could say less than 30%. I it's not like I'm trying to be, I'm just trying to make this a neutral, unleading, unbiased way for people to say what they want. And so every time you say, oh, we can't do that because DEMPED has already decided X, Y, Z, it just makes my hair stand on end. So I'll just say that as a
let me ask
blanket.
you don't think, or so we have an option that says, I do not support any affordable housing at the site. You don't think that's sufficient?
Well, what if you don't support any housing at the site? In other words, if your concern is not with affordable housing, but rather housing.
but wait, I mean, we're trying to foreclose the option of residential, of luxury housing at the site. I mean, the only way there's going to be luxury housing at the site is if there's affordable housing and there's a cross subsidy of IZ.
Hey, I don't know where you're coming from. Once upon a time, Peter, you said you thought the question should be asked straightforwardly. Should there be housing at the Chevy Chase Commons? So in other words, some people, I am in that group, believe there should be no housing. And it doesn't matter if it's all affordable, half affordable, all luxury, no luxury, you know,
So
they just don't think there should be housing there, that it's an incompatible use. So if you don't allow for that possibility, I mean, people are just gonna have to start writing on their survey, except they can't because it's electronic. So then what?
I don't have, I mean, for the commissioners, I see exactly what Andrea is saying, and it would make the survey consistent. And I've told you guys before, I don't have any problem with how this survey turns out. I don't I see, adding that not as a negative. I mean, where we say I do not support any affordable housing, we could just say any housing. And that would obviously that would include affordable, right?
Yeah, you can do that.
Could add, I don't know how maybe we could wordsmith it to where we separate the two, where there's a housing at all. I don't want any housing, or I do support affordable housing at these affordability levels. Maybe we could just tweak it so that that is an option there.
That seems reasonable.
Susan may have a methodological suggestion here. Susan?
Yeah, my concern is, I'm just listening to, this whole discussion, and, and I am thinking about the more sort of the typical survey taker who may not have been following the complexity of some of these issues. Like, look, every single question there's discussion about some complexity. And so, so one is like a question to all of you: if this turns out to be a 20 to 30 minute survey, because people will have to, even though it's a paragraph, if they've not been following these issues, they may have to read it several times to get their heads around it. What is it? What is this? Right. So if we're fine if the test, the pilot shows that it takes people 20 minutes, 25 minutes to complete the survey, is that okay? We can't say this is a 10-minute survey and then people come to it expecting 10 minutes. And then they start to see long, what will for them will look like long blocks of text, the average. So we just have to decide like what's acceptable. And the other thing is just to bear in mind that, this is not unique. It's actually quite like some public policy research with the public is very challenging because the issues are so complex. And the survey instrument is not always the best instrument methodologically at getting people's views on some of these complexities. Like you can get people to do this, what they call deliberative research. And they're in a series of like kind of focus groups over time as they're exposed to more information, and how do their views change as they understand the issues more deeply. So I'm just saying there are other methodologies, but time is tight. So I just caution you to think about what a survey is good for and not trying to necessarily achieve too much with a survey. You will lose people. But I don't know for sure. Maybe I don't know all the constituents, I just know a lot of people are really busy or they're tired and they just want to get to their workout or their TV show or call their loved one, whatever it is. And to find a half an hour in their day to start to get their head around complex issues that they haven't been following is not an easy ask. That's my personal point of view, but that's why we have to get out and test it, because it's not what I think. Yeah, we got to get out there.
That's right, because that information and time is a trade-off.
Yeah, it is, and we won't know until we test it.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, Cal.
So I'm curious why it seems like it's strange to say 30%, less than 30%, then 30 to 50 or whatever you had, and then over 50. Why not go all the way up on the other side too and make it stratified? Because there are definitely people who want 100% or maybe 80%. It just seems like that's where it doesn't seem balanced.
That was a discussion point at the last meeting. Exactly that, Cal. You're right.
Balance, yeah.
Why are we stopping at 50?
Well, it's more than 50, right? So you've got up to 50 and then you've got more than 50, but Cal, you'd like to have it actually be broken out at 80 and 100, or?
Well, I think if you just said less than 50 and more than 50, that'd be one thing, but I heard something about a 30, and you have a 0 option that you guys are talking about now. So if you have a zero option, you certainly need 100. And if you have a 30, then you probably need something on the other side midpoint. So I just want to see it more balanced. However, whether it's 3 categories or 5 categories.
Okay. The only thing about this question, just to keep in mind, it's a conditional question. And this goes to Andrea's point. It's if the community center and library site is redeveloped with housing, not affordable housing, then the question is, how much of it should be affordable? Right?
Yeah, some people
That's the
do
question.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, Cal's right. Andrea's right too. I mean, those are the two extremes that we have in the community. So I think Cal is saying if we have one, we should, recognize the other. However, I mean, we could come up with something and add that.
Yeah. All right.
I think Ron gave us a suggestion at the last minute, meeting. I'm sorry, at the last meeting, I think Ron had some categories that he suggested that included 100%.
Okay.
Michelle?
Just 2 things. I do wonder how realistic the 100% affordable is, how realistic it is that a nonprofit would come in. If there needs to be underground parking, I think DC's hope was that whoever develops this will chip in for the library and community center. And this has not been what DC has been talking about. It has not been what Ward 3 Vision was talking about early on when they objected to limiting the scale, saying we can't limit the scale, otherwise the developer won't be able to make enough money on it. So I just, it almost seems like a PR thing. Oh, it can be 100% affordable, but can it really? Is that really what anyone's really talking about? I don't know. The other thing is, to Susan's point, the reason we're doing the survey is because many of us feel the community has not had a voice in this. And many people in the community are not as aware of all the ins and outs of this as we are. They don't know all these details. I do think it is important to have explanation. I think it's important for the questions to actually have context so people understand what we're talking about. And I think adding another 10 or 15 minutes to the survey is not a bad thing if people understand more fully what the trade-offs are, what we're actually talking about. So that's my 2 cents. We do need context.
Again, that's all absolutely right. If we're okay with the survey going longer, we have kind of had this idea that it would be shorter, a 10-minute or so survey. So that's kind of what we were aiming at, trying to bring this in towards that goal. But again, as Susan said, if that's not it and we're okay with something going longer, fine. As to this particular question, I think we can fix it. Lisa, Peter, all right. So do you want to bump to the next one?
I think so. Can I just as an aside, I want to say, addressing Michelle's point, early in the discussions of this survey, we talked about a lot of explanation and a lot of asking people questions about what they knew and didn't know and so on and so forth. And I think that, asking broad questions and depending on a survey, we need to try to avoid, as Cal has said many times at these meetings, binary questions. But the fine grain is, I think, is a mistake, and running really long is a mistake too. So, I mean, I do think that we're going to, whatever context is going to be offered here is going to be thin context. We want to know what the community thinks, like with the knowledge base that they have. So.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off on that, I think version 5 does that. I think version 5 straddles that line fairly well. That's just my point. Ron, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add, even though substantively I couldn't be in more disagreement with Andrea's position on this. I think in terms of process, that these response categories should definitely give people who approach this the way she's approaching it, or people at the other end who think the buildings can be 50 feet taller or contain 100 more units or whatever. Those people should be given the opportunity in the response categories to express themselves also.
I agree. Completely agree. Okay, so we'll work on this one to include Andrea's comments about housing none and Cal's suggestion on the range. Okay.
Okay.
Now the wording though, I'm still going to advocate for my wording. We can pare it down a little bit as Peter suggested. So I would say throw my wording in there, pared down as Peter suggested, with those changes as well. Are y'all okay with that?
See if I can pare it down with that. See if you're okay with it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
again, what we're doing as I'm experiencing it here in real time is backing ourselves into a much longer survey.
Maybe not. I mean, listen, you guys keep saying much longer. I don't think it's going to be that much longer. I mean, I think, and I don't know if I was a stickler on 10 minutes prior to. I mean, to me, a goal is a goal, but the real goal is to make sure that people understand the questions and to have some degree of background about the information that they can make an intelligent decision. And I just don't think, adding 2 or 3 sentences to some of these questions is going to, take an extra 10 minutes for our survey takers. We'll have to see what happens when we do the test group. But I mean, we can't send out a survey that has no context to the people that are looking at it. That's not going to help us.
Again, the design, I understand that point of view, Lisa. And I would just add that the design scheme of having background information that they can refer to is built into this now. But I hear what you're saying. You want it built into each question as opposed to something they could jump to read that gives them the background. I got it.
Yeah. I think it adds a lot of different, context to the question. I mean, you can read background all you want, but having additional detail in there, append to the question, I think makes a big difference in your answer.
The thing about the background that we also have to be mindful of is the background for the average user going to be clear? We won't know until we test it, but that's something else we have to be mindful of. The more we say, the more opportunity there is to confuse people as well as clarify things. So it's just something we have to be mindful of. The next question is about how much of the housing would be 2 and 3 bedroom units.
Okay.
And this then is your question. What was on your survey on the compilation you put
Yeah. So you added in here percent. I just think this is, so my question was, so this one I went simple, where I just said, what are your preferences for the type of residential units that could be created at the site? Now I pulled this question for one straight from DMPED's previous sites, our RFP process. Not that we have to go with what they went with, but this is a straight DMPED community preference question.
Okay.
And I said studio 1, 2, 3+ bedrooms, and I support letting the developer decide based on market factors, which seems to have come out of all the questions.
No.
Oh, I see it. Yeah. Now yours, though, you're asking what percentage of the affordable housing should be 2 and 3 bed units to accommodate families. And so I have a couple thoughts on this. I think we are straighten, we're creating a strong preference here, maybe a little bias towards families. Not everybody is going to need a 2-bedroom. When I first came to DC, I lived in a studio apartment. It was just me, myself, and I. I did not need a 1-bedroom. I didn't need a 2. I didn't need a 3. I needed a studio. And that's what I found in Adams Morgan. And I was grateful for it. So we are leaving out a lot of different housing options for people in DC that don't have families. This question is heavily biased towards families, which I have one now, but I also was a single when I first moved here. So I'm really kind of concerned about that. And I don't know if it's wise, and I would maybe like to hear definitely from Andrea and Ron on this, to also add unit size with the percentage that we're seeking out of that development. We just don't know how many we could potentially get. I don't know if we want to box ourselves in that way. We talked about trying to be realistic. Some of our questions, like we're going to ask about 100%, and Michelle gave us her thoughts on how realistic that is. I'm just worried if we should maybe think about combining unit type and percentage of unit type in one question. But my major concern is the bias this question presents for families. And I'm definitely not about asking it this way.
So let me, before we go to Andre and Ron, let me just try to reflect a little bit here on the origin of this question, right? So I don't know how many times I've heard it a million times, that if this development only has studios and 1-bedrooms and doesn't accommodate workforce families, because up and down Connecticut Avenue right now, there is a dearth of 2-bedroom and 3-bedrooms that are affordable, and therefore families can't locate in our neighborhood, then that's not good. That's an issue. That's a problem, right? So just to be clear about where this is coming from, it's coming.
I get it. I get it. I've heard it too, but I'm just saying it reflects a bias towards families. And we have to be we have to be careful about that. They're not all going to be, 2 and 3 bedrooms. I'm sure there are going to be some smaller unit sizes there too. And having the range, as I offered, gives the community an opportunity to kind of say what that range is that they want. So asking it and including the studios in 1-bedroom doesn't prevent someone in the community from selecting a family-sized unit. Commissioner Ferguson always talks about, the apartment renters along Connecticut Avenue who might not be families or who are families. So, it's kind of like the affordability levels. We have a range of people in a community that reflect a range of living situations. And our questions should reflect that as well. So that's just my, 2 cents on that. Commissioner Gofflin, then let's go to Ron, then Andrea. You're on mute, Peter.
Seems to me that the simpler version allows people to express the felt need for larger apartments by checking 2 and 3. If we wanted to, we could add to the sentence by saying, smaller apartment, what's your preference for the types of residential units that could be created? Smaller units for newcomers, or singles, or multi-bedroom ones for families. But the simpler question, Bruce, to your point, gives people the option of expressing the very sentiment we've all heard by checking 2 and 3.
I'm okay with that. I'm totally fine with it. We can switch in a nanosecond. I was just trying to reflect on the comment in the community about making sure these are for families, but I'm cool with the way you've got it, Lisa. We can do that. Fine. It's okay.
Okay. Ron, then Andrea.
Thank you, Lisa. I was just going to throw a point of information in here. which is to the extent that these units are, the project ends up a mix of market rate and affordable. Inclusionary zoning requires that the affordable units are the same ratio of bedrooms to, same mix, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms as the market rate. So that's just that's a fact. And if the market rate units here are bigger units, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom units for empty nesters, then the IZ units are going to have to be the same. And then the second thing would be just quickly that I know Ward 3 Vision's partners, Washington Interfaith Network, feel very strongly that there should be an emphasis on family units here, whether that's 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom, and what the percentage is, I don't know, but that there should be some emphasis on family units.
Okay. Andrea?
I'm glad that Ron clarified that with regard to IZ. I had sort of a vague memory of reading that. The only thing I would say is if DEMPED says they're going to do 30%, they might be referring to the disposition legislation that says if it's a public site, it has to be 30% if it's close enough to a metro station, which this is not, but DEMPED said they would make it match anyway. But what I'm trying to say is that's not actually IZ. So I'm not sure if the rules are the same, just to complicate things. So, but I actually endorse giving people the opportunity to signify what size units they're interested in. I would only just say that maybe it's unclear whether it should be specified as just affordable, for the affordable units, or whether it should just be for the building.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know legally.
Okay, so Bruce, you're okay with listing out studio 1, 2, 3 bedroom plus?
Totally fine with it.
Okay. Are you committed to the percentage? Because that's the other part of your question. You're asking for a percentage of like 25% should be 2, 3 bedrooms. It's a little different in wording.
Right. No, I'll yield on this point entirely. I was merely trying to be Solomonic and accommodating to the concern about this emphasis on family, since we've heard it so much.
Okay.
That's all I was trying to do here.
Okay.
If that's not where we want to go with this collectively, then again, I'll yield on it.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Peter?
Fine.
Okay.
So the next, Lisa, is simply the level of affordability. And you had a question that was around the populations served, and you named different populations. I struggled with that because of some of the categories, the way they were framed, but also one of the categories even mentions reference to AMI, and then we'd have to spell all that out. This was a particularly difficult question for me to wrap my mind around at the end of the day at all levels. And so what I came down with, again, with Steve and Susan and Anna also helping out on this, was what I put here, which does have an explanation of the median family income, the levels, and then looks at what's typically, as I understand it, considered to be extremely low income, which is up to 30% of MFI. And then low income. So to try to put a label on it so people taking this understand what we're talking about, as opposed to simply putting the percentages, which I don't know that people even understand what that equates to, right? They wouldn't get it. So that's where I was coming from with this.
I don't have a problem with this one. Peter? Peter, you're on mute. Are you talking? Or are you just, what are you doing?
I'm thinking, don't know what we want to is characterized by extremely low income. Well, that's fine. I think it's fine. Let's go on. I mean, I think that we still got a number of contentious issues to deal with. So,
I mean, and I don't have a problem with this because these are these are it. So extremely low income is up to 30%. Low income is, 50, and then workforce is that middle income 50 to 80. So I don't have a problem with it because it's captured correctly. Andrea, you still have your hand up. Did you have anything on this?
Couldn't you just actually say the income levels?
that's the dispute.
No, but I mean with dollar numbers.
I had that in the previous various drafts that I did, Andrea. I won't get into all the details right now, but it wasn't easy to do it that way.
I agree. I agree.
Because I know from years of this that people never know what extremely low, very low, low, they never know what that means. And
well, it's defined. You don't have this in front of you, but the question
okay.
has the median family income for a single person household and for a family of 4. And 30%, people can do the math in their head pretty quick.
Okay.
They're going to have to do the calculation.
Okay, that's fine. Fine.
Yeah. And I have a graphic that I sent around. We could, if you want, Bruce also linked the graphic here that explains a little bit in like a 1-page graphic what AMI is, what it is in DC. I sent that to the commissioners. I used it for Ward 4 housing. It's actually really good graphic, but I agree with Bruce trying to break out those income levels for each category is, I think, very cumbersome.
Because you have 2 for each. You've got the individual household, single person, and the family of 4.
Right.
So a lot of stuff in each. Okay, they can do the math.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Bruce.
All right. So those were the 3 affordable housing questions, Lisa.
Okay, let me just check.
And you had questions on yours also that were 3 in number. I mean, they were from the compilation you put together, right? There were 3 of those.
Let me just check them off. So that was this one. Give me just 1 second to.
That was your number 3, Lisa.
That was my number 5.
Lisa.
That was my number 5. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
So those are covered. Okay.
All right. The next 2 are height and density. And those refer to your 8 and 9, Lisa.
Okay.
They're not wildly different, except trying to simplify the language as much as possible on density. I don't think the height one changed, except that in the lead-in text on the height, let me just see, I'm going to your document.
About the trade-off.
Well, no, this is the height, not the trade-off one.
Oh, the city proposed new zoning?
Now, so the first one on so I'm referring here to my question number 8, height, and your question number 9, height.
Okay.
Okay. And I don't see a big difference here.
I see. Yeah. The difference is I put in reference points. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I put in a reference point of Connecticut Avenue. So current zoning of Connecticut Avenue, 55 feet in height, 3 to 5 stories. And then I put in for reference 5333 as a reference point as well.
Okay, I just tried to limit this to what's at the community center library site, both. Now, of course, the current zoning is different from the proposed.
Yeah.
Since this is about what the city is proposing, this whole thing, I thought this was important to use. And then just the reference point of how high are the community center library now? I mean, I don't know. People don't know that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 5333 is much taller than anything that's going to go on here. So it's sort of like it's not I mean, is it an apt example even? And it's.
What about current zone? Okay, so I can give you 5333, But what about current zoning? I mean, it currently allows for 55 feet, 3 to 5 stories. You don't think that's a good reference point for people?
Oh, it's okay. It's just that I've got the height. We have the height of the community center library now. That's all I'm thinking about. People are looking in their mind's eye at the site and thinking, okay, what does this equate to, right? That's all. You can put that current zoning in. That's fine. I just thought I was trying to simplify it. That's all.
Okay. I do think putting the current zoning in is important for folks to know this is currently what's allowable and giving them that as a reference.
Okay. All right. Okay. And then the breakouts there are the same as they were before.
Okay.
40 to 80, no preference, and I don't support any development. You know, that's standard response.
Okay.
Okay.
Peter, what's your comment on this?
Fine.
Okay. Moving along then. The next one is the density one, right?
Okay.
And this is your number 8. And so I took a stab at just making this again as simple as possible as to the density of a redeveloped community center library site if trade-offs were necessary, as opposed to a preamble about trade-offs being necessary. Just said, if trade-offs are necessary, which would you prefer? And then came down again with the taller and narrower with more green space, shorter and wider with less green space, open space, no preference, and I don't support any of it. So it's the same response categories.
Okay, but you don't think we should kind of tell them what trade-offs could potentially be necessary? I mean, for like people that are taking this survey and haven't been keeping up, like my husband, he would be like, what the hell are y'all talking about? Trade-offs. He wouldn't have a clue. I'm just thinking about, the folks like him who I am going to make take the survey, Vertiscore. I mean, he would be like, what is this? You understand? I mean, I'm just thinking the average Joe that, like we've kind of discussed, has not kept up with this stuff. Are they going to think about when they hear the word trade-off? What are they going to think? I mean, are they going to understand?
I'm totally easy. We can put some of the language back in.
Lisa, I mean, both versions we're looking at have trade-off in it. Bruce basically puts what the trade-off is in the option, the answer option versus verbiage before it. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my problem with this is the same problem I had with the last meeting, which is that I'm not sure that. Well, never mind what my problem was the last meeting or this meeting. I'm fine with that.
Okay. Michelle?
I'm sorry. With respect to what you're talking about before, the height of the buildings, and you were saying put in the current zoning, which is 55 feet. But I believe most of the buildings on Connecticut that are nearby are only 40 feet. I've been told that. So it may be, you say, yeah, it could be 55, but the reality is your surrounding buildings are only 40 feet. So, just so people know that what is actually around it is only 40 feet, as opposed to, oh, well, that's 55. So, even though it could go to 55, they aren't, the commercial buildings. So I'm not sure what you should do about that. To say, well, it could already go up to 55. Well, but they aren't. Okay. Yeah. And most people kind of like them the way they are. With respect to this question, I brought up something last time, and I'm still not sure how to get my head around whether I think this is a good idea or not. But I don't know if it's worthwhile to put in the third option, which would be, not taller and not wider. Okay. But I raised that last week, and I'm not, I can kind of see where what he's trying to do with this question. Shows there are trade-offs. Which do you prefer? But it's sort of like there are going to be trade-offs. How about we say, hey, Demhead, we only want this if you don't make it this high, and we don't want it going bigger, wider. So I'm not sure how they feel, but I want to throw that out there as a possibility. Because, again, what we're doing right now is sort of sticking to the script, and maybe we should do that to show people you're going to lose something either way. But I don't. Anyway, I just bring that up. Okay.
Yeah. You guys have any comment on Michelle?
We can
I
test
mean, I
it.
understand what she's saying. I just don't know how to.
But again, we're going to test these, Lisa. So we'll just see
Yeah.
how people deal with them. If they come back and say, I didn't understand this, or you left me out, or I didn't, we'll see how it goes. I certainly recognize the issues.
Yeah, definitely.
We're trying to get at this very difficult issue of understanding how big it could be without introducing Florida area ratio and all that stuff here, right? That's kind of the idea.
Well, is what Michelle's suggesting an option that would say, I'd prefer buildings no bigger than, or no denser than those currently on the site. You might actually lose the I don't support redevelopment of community center library and just well, got a pattern here. So
that response category just has to be in there for those who answered above that they don't support it, because they can't be left out downstream in these questions. The whole idea about this is to create a trade-off scenario and get people to weigh in. That's kind of the point of this question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ron has his hand up.
I hate this question because I don't understand it at all. I mean, it's a trade-off of open space versus height. I guess that's the trade-off that's being discussed here. There are other trade-offs in building less, in that you get less affordable housing, you get less new residents. I mean, I just don't know. I hope when you test it, you can ask people, what do you think this question means? Or some follow-up like that, because I'm just not 100% sure I understand what it's doing in here. Especially since ultimately there's going to be a design and people are going to be able to weigh in on the design.
So Ron, I totally hear you. We're trying to get at, and it's difficult, the size of the thing that people, have expressed all kinds of concerns about.
Right.
Again, without jumping into drawings they look at and Florida area ratio calculations, and it could be this, it could be the other, because that's just way, way, way too confusing for a survey like this, right? So this is just trying to get at a little bit of that.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, maybe there's a way of finding some language that says that, and again, with Andrea and Michelle, their point is well taken, that this is taking as a given that you're going to have X amount of development on the site. That density is set at some number, and it can be designed on the site in various ways. It can be taller with more open space, or a combination of taller and shorter, or it can be wider and lower. But all that starts with saying that the density is going to be X. And, some people are not, I'm fine with that, but other people obviously aren't. So I don't know how to make a question out of that.
Well, also, Ron, and we're trying to deal with the issue of trade-offs. There are multiple trade-offs that are possible here. We can't really deal with the number because the number is not set yet. That's in flux. So I think that this is an exemplar question about trade-offs.
How about asking it in some way where you sort of ask people, that if they would be comfortable with a combination with a smaller, narrower building in combination with lower buildings and or more open space. And I don't know. I'm really struggling with this. I'm not. I'm trying to come up with a question that makes sense to me, and I'm struggling with it.
Well, again, we can
'Cause-
test this and see how it goes.
I guess, or maybe when you mention the trade-off, that the trade-off here is in open space and or lower buildings and higher buildings. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not making sense because I'm really struggling with it.
This question has a very simple construction that is at a particular kind of trade-off. It is only what it is. We could introduce other variables and other options, but then you get into kind of endless permutations. Again,
Well,
I think we just try to go at this and see what happens, right? It's aimed at trying to help people understand, get their take on size and how they approach size, not
well,
just
in the intro, let's make sure that what the particular trade-off is somehow defined a little bit, because to me, the big trade-off here, the capital T, capital O trade-off, is if you build less, you get less affordable housing. That's, to me, that's the capital T trade-off. What you're talking about is another kind of trade-off relative to open space and massing.
And that's kind of how, well, I don't know if I worded it right, but in my wording, I say specifically trade-offs would be likely in redevelopment of the community center and library site to achieve more affordable housing. I mean, that could be tweaked. Because
or to
yeah,
to achieve open space and or make transitions with the adjacent neighborhoods. That's the other category of trade-off.
So to go back to that, I mean, this was originally a question also that I wrote. It came off the draft survey. So I'm happy to go back to saying to achieve more affordable housing. That's the trade-off. And that's not a problem. It was just to try to, again, I think we're close on this. If we're in agreement on using this question, we can tweak this language.
well, this was supposed to be the meeting to tweak the language.
I'm with you, Lisa. Let's put in affordable housing. Let's go back and use the language that we had in it. It reads as trade-offs would be likely in redevelopment of the community center library site to achieve more affordable housing. And then you ask them, what's the trade-off that you're happy with?
Are you good with that, Peter? Peter, you are muted. Can you stay off mute? Do you have some party going on in the background every now and then?
Oh yeah,
On?
it's a hell of a time over here. It's I'm being polite. No, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Michelle?
I am very much not fine with that because, the way Ron Eichner is putting it, if you put in the trade-off is less affordable. This is assuming that to everyone, the be all and end all of this entire thing is affordable housing. And this is frankly the way the ANC have been approaching it in the past. It's all about affordable housing. I think there's a lot of other concerns with this. I don't think a lot of people in the community are just laser focused on the most important thing is how much affordable housing we can get out of this, which is not to say they're opposed to any affordable housing, but they may be opposed to it right there because a lot of us are opposed to any housing there, but to frame this as your trade-off is you'll get less affordable. That's kind of going with this assumption that the big thing that everyone cares about is the affordable housing thing. And I don't think that is necessarily accurate with where the community is. And it's also sort of a biased thing of the most important thing is affordable housing. And again, that affordable housing, there's also going to be, the same percentage of market, bigger percentage of market rate if you make it bigger in all likelihood. It's still going to be the same percentage of affordable, So you make it bigger, you're going to get more market rate. But the main thing to me is it's kind of, this may be the most important thing to Ron Eichner, but I don't think most people in the community are like, well, I mean, the main thing that matters to me is we have as much affordable housing as we can. So there's a lot of other issues. Okay. So
Michelle, this
Well, I
gives
think Ron added, like, kind of near the end, he added, it was some other trade-offs that he meant. So it wasn't just affordable housing.
Yeah, the question is written as trade-offs for massing and open space, and I, I understand the way the question was written. I just wanted to make sure. I just want it to be clearer and be more meaningful, and also not conflate it with the big trade-off, which to me and many people in the community is you build less, you get less affordable housing. That's all. I just think it's a confusing question.
Yeah, but I don't think for you that's a big trade-off. I don't think it's necessarily true for many people that's
Well,
the
whatever.
big thing.
so
Yeah. Let me
Oh.
hear from Andrea.
The thing is, the assumption that there must be a trade-off is based on there must be housing built there. So I assume that there is still the option for that question to say, I reject any trade-off.
There is.
Okay, thank you.
There is.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, Bruce is getting at, I think, assuming that there's going to be a certain massing of it, let's just look at the size. Do you want it taller and more open, or do you want it wider so it isn't as tall, but then you're going to lose some open space? So he's asking this specific thing. Okay. So, it doesn't get into, oh, well, now we lose affordable. I don't know. Anyway.
the original setup, which I wrote in my previous draft, which Lisa incorporated into her compilation, which we're alternately looking at, framed it as trade-offs given the affordable housing piece of it, because this entire survey is about the city's proposal to redevelop the community center and library to include affordable housing, right? That's the whole setup.
And that's fair, Bruce, because read the sentence again. This is from Lisa's document. Trade-offs would be likely in redevelopment of the community center and library site to achieve more affordable housing. It's not us saying that. It is one of the things that if it is developed in this way, if it is developed with affordable housing, it's likely there are going to be trade-offs. And so I don't. And the notion that this is one among many trade-offs that we could cite. But I think Bruce is right that the setup here just says, if there's going to be affordable housing, there are going to be trade-offs of height versus density. There are going to be other trade-offs too, but so I think that we can wordsmith this without making a commitment. Putting front and center that we already support affordable housing, or that we can make this question work. So,
by the way, all those trade-offs exist even if there's no housing.
Absolutely, I understand.
There's going to be 70,000. Even without housing, there's 75,000 square feet of building going to go on the site, plus open space, and how that is configured is a matter of just the sort of trade-offs that Bruce was referencing.
Wait, why are you assuming that if all they do is redo the library and community center?
Because that's how many square feet redoing the library and community center needs.
Yeah, but that's no trade-off from where we are now.
Yeah, but that could be a one-story building across the whole site. That could be a 5-story building with both facilities and a lot more open space. Yeah. There's lots of options.
But even the design scheme that the city came up with, DGS and DPR, as you'll recall, after the 2018 community survey and commission recommendations, increased the size of the community center. So Ron's point holds here, and no matter how you do this, you're going to sacrifice green space and open space if you build bigger buildings.
Right.
So,
Well, no,
Not if they go up a
necessarily.
story.
well, okay,
Yeah.
now to go up, right? Okay, well, there's that. I mean,
Yeah, and
the
I think
trade-off- all
anyone
I'm
can
saying
live
is
with
the
a
trade-off
story.
holds. The trade-off
That's
holds.
the essence of your question, Bruce.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're good with this.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next three, Lisa, I don't want to say they're easy, but they're pretty straightforward because these are the indoor and outdoor amenities for the community center and the uses of the library that would translate into design criteria for the library that come from the DEMPED survey. Okay. So there's no creation, nothing new here. These are just the same questions.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I'm proposing to use these for the simple reason that we have already response categories. If we use them, then we have comparability. We're giving our residents another chance to express their views, citing these indoor and outdoor amenities for the community center and uses of the library. And off we go.
Well, I don't know if we have much to talk about on these three because these are the same three I have on mine too, right?
No, they are. That's why I'm saying I think they're pretty straightforward.
Unless,
Can I
unless,
just talk about
yeah.
one,
Peter, yeah.
one thing? Can't we please, in the library one, I mean, using the logic Bruce used with the very first question, which is we want people to be able to see themselves, and one of the options as their option. We don't have getting a book.
Okay, Peter.
We don't-
Take a look at question 12 as I wrote it. I put it here
Read a book.
in addition to checking out a book. I think when they did this, they assumed that as a basic function of the library, and they didn't have to list it as a response category. But
Yeah,
I put it there in addition to checking out a book.
You put it in the question. All right. I went through the whole list and couldn't find it.
Yeah. All right. Okay, hang on. Let me check my document. Because I think there's just a few that.
That was my first reaction as well, by the way.
Yeah, but I caught you on that, Steve. I mean, I honored your view by putting that in parenthetically, but if you guys want there to be the first response category, check out a book, that's fine. It won't track with the DEMP, but it doesn't matter. We can put
I'm fine the way it's. I mean, I don't know. I'm not tied to that. I mean, if Peter is, I mean, he can make the case for it. I'm okay. Peter, are you okay with that?
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with this parenthetical.
Okay. So let's go to what was left off on mine.
Can we start with parking?
No, actually want to start with, if you don't mind, my number 2, which was from Chevy Chase Voice,
Right.
just in case they have to drop off. And I mean, we've been on here for a while. It's 9:20. This was one that they had that I just don't see why we would not ask it. And for Andrea and those from Chevy Chase Voice on the line, it was a question about on the current Civic Core site, our freestanding 19. So it basically describes the site, what's on the site. And it says, please signify the importance of maintaining the existing features in terms of their importance to you and benefit to the community. And it talks about the library, community center, green space, gathering space, the trees, various types of trees, the garden, tot lot. So it's, and I'm sure they can explain this better than me. And I know we went around last time on this one, but this is not proposed use, planned use. This is basically telling the city what we like about the current site and what's important to the community about the current features of the site.
So before we go to our Chevy Chase Voice friends, Here's the reason I didn't put it in.
Yeah.
The response categories are redundant with other response categories.
Mhm.
So to say that we value the library and the community center, we have that one question of assigning 10 points already about library and community center. To talk about basketball and pickleball court, performance space, surface parking, they're in the outdoor amenities response categories on the other. So we could take a look at somehow fashioning a question here, but we have to be careful not to confuse people taking the survey that they're saying, oh, you're asking this again. Or, I'm being asked twice about this.
I mean,
Right.
the thing is, so I don't think it's confusing because it says existing amenities. What do you think is important? And we ask it in a different way. I mean, we're having them rate the importance. So like 1 to 5 on the scale of 5, how important is this one? How important is that? How important is this? How important is that? When we go to ask them which indoor and outdoor amenities would you most like to have at either the community center or the library, we're basically saying to them, give me your top 5 choices. So I see it as a little different. I mean, maybe you see it, different because you're a survey guy. To me, as like just a basic community member, I just see those 2 questions as kind of fundamentally different. But I would like to hear from Chevy Chase voice, because if they are okay with what we have structured in the survey and they're okay with scrapping it, I'm okay with scrapping it.
I want to weigh in on this one because you may remember from the last meeting, Jim Nash was confused about difference between this question and the future.
Yeah,
question.
and then you might remember too at the end, when I explained it, he was like, "Oh, okay, I agree with you, Lisa."
But the point is, Lisa, you had to explain it, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to be around there to explain, no. Now here we're talking about existing, and over here we're talking about, so I think that's a problem. And the other problem I have is that there are just too many categories. A normal person not deeply involved in this is not going to go, oh, special trees. I really care about special trees, not so much heritage. Oh, no. Heritage trees care more about than special trees. So I just think the question, if we're gonna have it, these categories have got to be boiled down because they're going to leave somebody like, what is the difference between trees and gardens, and then the next 3 things. So I think there's a real problem with the way it's structured.
Andrea, then Michelle.
Because I can't see the other question that asks people to rate exterior amenities, I don't know whether those include the same kinds of things as currently exist, but I thought maybe a compromise might be if they're all included, that there could be an asterisk next to the ones that are currently there, and you could just say asterisk, these are currently found on the site. That could get rid of maybe duplication and confusion.
Not bad. Good idea.
Yep, Michelle.
I think it is important to have something like this, because I think there are some people who don't go there often and may not really know what all is there, or may not remember much, particularly for those in our community who live further away. But I will say, as to the trees, Andrea and I already had this discussion. I agree completely. Do not get into the different kinds of trees. People don't know what that means. I would suggest shortening that to just open green space, trees. I do think you should say trees, not just green space or open space, but that's it. Don't get into special trees, heritage trees. Absolutely not. But the rest of it, I too, it's hard for us because we can't see the whole thing, and I can't remember how the other question is worded exactly. But this is saying these things are here. What do you want to keep? What is of value to you? But yeah, it would be useful to see the other one before we totally say you have to have this. But I think it does have some value. It can be shortened.
Sometimes in situations like this, people refer to mature trees, which means something to people.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny because there are river birches there that aren't huge like the tree in front of the library along Connecticut, but right in front of the community center between the library
Yeah,
and the
nice.
center, there's some beautiful river birches that are native trees and very, very valuable for wildlife, but their trunks aren't big enough to be a heritage tree, but anyway, whatever. But I think just saying trees and yeah, there may be some scraggly things that don't matter, but most of them are actually quite nice. Anyway.
So trying to build on Andrea's suggestion, Bruce, recognize that taking that approach would mean making the outside question 10 in your document, the outdoor amenities, not concentric with the DEMPED thing, which is fine with me, but it would, to the extent there's some value to being concentric, we'd have to lose some of that to get some of these categories in, because I don't see enough about, we're gonna have to expand on the outdoor green space, for example. We're gonna have to
Or just do a separate question and shorten the list. But I mean, if Bruce, are you okay with adding, I mean, are you really tied to keeping it to DEMPED? Which I mean, I see the value in that.
No, I'm not. So the DEMPED thing is a matter of convenience. If we're talking about this question and how this question relates to all other questions, methodologically, it's got a lot of problems. I understand the sentiment. So I take
I mean,
Peter's point.
are you good with adding the missing categories to your number 10?
Yeah, I mean, we can put those in there. It won't be the same as a DEMPED. That's okay. There's nothing doctrinaire about this. They just won't line up.
the asterisks on the ones where there is already, the ones.
Yeah.
Under the solution.
And we can include in terms of outdoor amenities, obviously gardens and trees, and we can put that in there.
Okay.
All right, well, that's a good.
Shouldn't be a problem.
Let's move on.
Okay.
So then
There were 2 parking ones, Lisa.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm looking at this other adjacent site one I had. I'm okay with that not being in there.
Okay.
Okay, and then the 2 parking ones.
So for the deal on the parking, again, understand I was looking at all this from the frame of trying to keep it to a dozen questions in 10 minutes, right? So I'm just trying to kind of was operating within that straitjacket. However, we do have parking in 3 other questions. So there's parking already mentioned and people are responding to parking. And if we think we need, so in the amenities, the outdoor amenities, there's surface parking. In the indoor amenities, there's underground parking. In the DEMPED categories, DEMPED questions. Okay. Yeah. So people can already express their priorities for those in those questions. And then parking, as I recall, appears someplace else.
So surface
I
parking.
think burying parking is a mistake. It's such a big cost and such a big design issue that I'd take it out of those things and put it separately. And
well, so the thing is, though, also there's parking in the public impacts, people's concerns about there not being obviously availability of parking, street parking, underground parking. So that's the 3rd place where it currently is in the survey. I guess my question is this: beyond what
I like number 4. The other ones don't necessarily do it for me, but with the way we have number 4 structured in parking there, that does it for me.
number 4, meaning what?
Your question number 4, where you have it under impact.
The impacts, right? Okay. Okay.
But Peter, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking this is such a big issue about open space versus surface parking that people like. That I mean, it's one of these trade-off things that is going to be really important in this as this project goes forward, assuming there's redevelopment of the site, and particularly if there's housing on the site. And it actually is an opportunity for another trade-off question, and removing it from some of these other questions, maybe not for.
Okay, what would you propose to ask?
Lisa, Peter, just a suggestion. Okay, I'm brainstorming here, right? So I'm not I'm not wedded to this. If in question, the question where we give people 10 points, if you think parking is so important, up the number of points and include parking as another response element.
What do you think, Lisa?
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's I could do that. Give them 12 points and add parking.
And that way they'd have to make a trade-off. They can't do a multiple of 3 or 4 and get to, even Steven on all these. They'd have to make a trade-off. We can do that. Now the question is, when you frame it that way, do you differentiate between underground and surface, or how do you do it?
I think, yeah. Ooh. That's another trade-off.
Where we get the most information that would be useful to us in this, and maybe to a developer too, is if we had a separate question, didn't do it under this, and found out whether people would use underground parking.
Well, that's what I said on the first. Peter,
What?
that's my original question. Would you use it?
Yeah.
And it's reasonable.
So the only thing I totally hear you, and the only reason I thought that we had it covered was it is an option for indoor amenities for people who really want the parking. They select it there. But if we want a separate question on it, fine. I'm not, that's okay.
Okay, let me hear from Michelle and Ron as we contemplate.
Okay, but again, I believe it's question 2 where you talk about the various amenities. I'm trying to recall, is that a distribute 10 points in terms of what is important to you and don't go over 10, i.e. give one 6, give one 4, and then you're done. Is that how that's done?
Yes.
Okay, I have a problem with that because I think we want to find out what is important to people, and they shouldn't have to be doing these trade-offs. Again, 10, you were saying make it more. 10 doesn't give you a whole lot. How about instead of that, by each one, you go like a 1 to 5, 1 being very important, or 5 being very, whatever, not very important, somewhat important, neutral, because I see a lot of surveys that do that, and that gives you a thing to tabulate, but it allows people to not be making these trade-offs. I mean, they should be, if 5 things are really, or whatever, are really important to them, they should be able to say that. And you can say, well, we got to have trade. Well, who said we have to? Let's find out what the community wants. Let them, express their thoughts, not just, I can only divide up 10. Gee, but
Just to be clear, Michelle, this is all good, but we were trying right now to try to look at parking, not shake down that question.
I was going back to that question. I know. There was a delay in calling on me.
No, that's all right. That's all right.
That's fine. I just want to bring that up when you talk about the other question. But this also goes to parking, because again, people should be able to say something about surface, because a lot of people have strong feelings about not liking underground parking. So that's all. Okay.
What I was going to add is that from the city's point of view, I'm not sure what we're trying to say to them. If we're trying to say there should be enough parking, from the city's point of view, there are zoning regulations governing parking that define how much parking is adequate, and they will apply here. So it's sort of meaningless to tell them there should be what they're already given. On the other hand, this question of whether open space should be used to store private vehicles, or if private vehicles should go underground, and how the community feels about that is, there's information there that may be useful. So I think would you use the underground parking? Do you value the surface parking? Whatever, those sort of questions might be valuable, but unless we want to get into the nitty gritty of how many spaces per 1,000 square feet a library should provide, the city's already answered that question in the zoning.
So I think, I'd advocate, at least for our field test, returning Lisa's 11, question 11, if provided you think you would use underground parking spaces.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thinking too.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
So now, Lisa, I think that goes through all the questions, but we still have the lead in and the header questions.
Let me check, Peter. Hang on. I'm just marking my document with what's in and out. But I think you're right. So parking.
There was one more.
Yeah, the ground floor retail.
I didn't include this because I never was part of a conversation in which we were considering retail for the community center. This one just did not compute with me. And on the one of the civic uses, I just assumed it was a given that we would have ANC offices in the community center. We have them now. I didn't.
Oh, I don't know if that's a given.
But are we going to ask the public if they think there ought to be ANC offices? I mean, I don't know. This question, I don't know. This one just didn't land with me.
Well, I sent around to that wonderful New York Times article today about ground floor uses. I don't know if people read it, but I think the opportunity to plant a seed here in the community and the city's ear about what happens at the ground floor, no matter what the program is for up above, whether there's 10 units of residential or 100, there's going to be a library, there's going to be a community center, and there's a real opportunity to enliven the ground level and the open space with institutional and community serving uses. I would love to be able to plant that seed.
Well, plant it, Ron. It's already planted. I mean, the small area plan goes to some length to talk about the size of fronts along Upper Connecticut Avenue, with this explicit reason that they want small shops.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry to interrupt, Peter, but no, I'm talking about on the community center. This is not a great retail site, and compared to the ones along the avenue. So the question is, what do you do with the ground floor that's consistent with the character of a civic core? And things like senior services, ANC, the council members, constituent services, maybe childcare. There's all kinds of things that could happen that aren't retail if people take a really creative view to it and engage various departments of the city.
Yeah, I
think there's an opportunity.
I do too.
Okay.
Andrea, then Cal.
I don't know. I think
Oh.
getting in.
Andrea
first?
first, then Cal, go on.
Yeah.
Go on, Cal.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
So I I think it's a mistake to start asking people what we should do with the ground floor in this survey. That just seems way outside the scope of what we're trying to do here and find out what the sentiments are. Those are all great ideas, Ron. But you know, we're asking them to now start to design the building in the survey.
But Cal, I'll go back to why I think my category headers are so important. The goal of this section of the survey is to influence the RFP. And we have the sky is the limit. There is no limitations from our standpoint. You know, we will obviously be reasonable, but this is the part of the survey that the ANC could say to DMPED that a good portion of our community wants this particular design element or that particular design element. So this is a part of the survey where we are telling DMPED what our preferences are on the site. So it is a perfect question for that, because I think if you think about it that way and have the community kind of think about, you know, like we don't have a dedicated senior center in Ward 3. What if we did have senior services in that building? I mean,
So
that's
this all
kind of
makes,
what this section is for.
this all makes sense to me. I just was just riffing off the retail thing. That's where I.
Yeah, maybe that should come out. Yeah. Okay. Andrea, then Michelle.
I thought that the idea was that the community center and library were going to occupy ground floors of the building or buildings. Is that not the case? Isn't that what DMPED is? I mean, isn't that what they've always said?
I certainly hope they occupy the ground floor and they're the centerpiece of it. But I mean, encourage it. I mean, the one thing about including this question and talking about maybe including an interest in having those public institutions face forward onto Connecticut Avenue, is that it has us addressing another design element than just housing. And so I mean, in that regard, it would sort of broaden the scope of what we're asking about design.
Michelle?
Yeah, I think what should be on the ground floor are the library and the community center that the public uses. And I mean, this space is not that big. I mean, where on earth are you going to have the room for the retail? And let me say this, I think adding a senior center there or like a preschool, childcare, I think keeping it to public community uses is fine. It's a great idea, but you know what that means you knock out, and I'm in favor of this, is the housing. Okay, I mean, but you can't do housing and all these other uses and library and community center, which I hope are a decent size. You know, I hope they're not smaller than what we have now. I mean, the site is not that big. Let's not go crazy here. Anyway, and with respect to the public facing, let me say, I think it's good to have I've said this word, it's good to have that green buffer. I think people like it. And the library in particular is basically, you go walking along Connecticut, you have the little walk. Is pretty much on, it's not that far off Connecticut. It's right there. There's community center less so, but that's not, it's not really what we're talking about. But anyway, I just think retail is just, there's not that much room here. Okay.
So, Lisa, the thing we have to be mindful of is whether some of these elements are already included in the indoor amenities that we're asking about. And when we introduce an idea, and this gets to Cal's point of ground floor, we are going to signal to people taking this that then there's a second floor, and they're going to wonder, well, where are all these things going? Again, this is why this question, and there's no retail in the mix at the community center. We're not talking retail. So I would favor trying to incorporate any of the aspects articulated in your question 15 in the indoor amenities without specifying which floor they're going to go on. Because I assume too, this was all going to be community center on the first floor, second floor, right?
Bruce, I would just add that when Ward 3 Vision looked at this, we think that stacking these uses and including the residential is probably not going to be the best way to do it, so that there is ground floor community center and library uses, and then there's ground floor of an apartment building, which is available, could be available for additional community uses. That's where we were coming from on this.
So would this be something then that later on in the process and working with DemPed, as they're going to engage the community, that we get into with them as opposed to the survey right now?
My idea is that if we can plant a seed that there's an opportunity here, that it get whatever we do with this survey, it's going to be transmitted to the respondents to the RFP, and they will see it and they will come back with some ideas on how to include it. They'll go out and they'll find they will identify spaces for certain uses that fit this concept.
I hear you. It's just a question of synchronizing this with the indoor amenities piece that's already in the survey, so that the respondent taking this doesn't get confused as to what we're asking. And there's a level of explanation required then in terms of ground floor use here that if we can make it work, I'm fine with it. I just, again, it's just a question of whether people taking this are going to understand this question versus others we're already asking about.
The people taking the survey would be identifying uses they think might be cool to include on this site. The people getting this and responding to it, the more, as I've said before, the more stuff that's on the menu that they can choose from to incorporate into their design, the happier they are. Even if it's all a little redundant and scattershot a little bit.
Yeah, I get it all. I'm still not sold on this question on the survey for the reasons I just mentioned.
So can we move off this and tackle the other issues and come back to it? Because I do think that we've got the lead-in and the headers. We have some real differences between the three of us here. Lisa, what do you think about that approach?
I do like the in terms of, so if you look at my page, I guess it's my page, let's talk about page 2, where I say general views on redevelopment of the civic core. So I kind of section it off, and then potential design elements. I mean, I could shorten it so that definitely we don't have to have the objectives there if we talk about the objectives somewhere else.
Are you talking about ground floor preferences still and adding that, or are you on?
No, I'm talking about the headers.
Oh, the header.
For the sections, yeah. I thought you moved off that ground floor question.
Yes, we move off it. I was asking you whether you were, because I think we've got to get the headers and the lead in the opening text agreement.
Okay. So what I did is so Bruce organized it kind of with unprecedented project, your view matters. So like headers, for each area. I organized it in a letter format and expanded a little bit on some of the things that he wrote and kept some of the things he wrote. but it was letter format. And I understand, you know, it's pretty much going to be said, hey, this is a short way to do it. I obviously like my format. This is what I'm used to, but we could, depending on, you know, where you stand, Peter, because we need to get this out of our little committee. Maybe my letter could be a letter to the community. And we could use his on the actual survey itself. I don't know. I just think it needs a little bit more detail in terms of the project and where we are and where we're headed. So mine is a little bit more detail on that.
So Lisa, again, on the intro text is really around telling people this is a big deal.
Oh, I get it. I
Yeah,
understand that.
yeah.
We just got two different ways that.
No, I hear you. And then the detail is reserved for the background. I'm with you on that. So I'm just hoping that people would read this and say, "Oh yeah, oh my God, I want to take this survey, right? I want to." And oh, by the way, you know, they're going to listen to me.
You can use it in two different ways. I can use my letter as a letter to the community, introducing the survey. It's similar, but it's not 100% similar, that I think it will cause confusion or any issues. And when they open up the survey, and some people are going to go straight. I mean, so my letter doesn't have to be linked to the survey itself. It will be like in the ANC newsletter. It will be in my newsletter. It will be on a listserv, blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
I think that's a good compromise.
Okay, headers.
I definitely think we need to use the headers, because I just think, you know, even with the people here tonight, I mean, Cal's question was perfectly demonstrated by that. I mean, some of the things that Michelle said, if we could narrow the sentence, you know, the paragraph down in a header. I don't think it's a lot, but I could take the objectives out. But I really do think we need those header explanations, because those questions are getting at different things. I mean, one is just straight general views, tell me how you feel. And the ANC is going to use that information very differently. But, you know, like when I was explaining to Cal about the ground floor question, the rest of those questions, they are design element questions that we're going to use to influence our RFP. So I just think we need some type of header and explanation to make that very clear to the public.
So Lisa, let me work with you on the headers. It's a question of how you categorize and where you put stuff under a header, right? So there's that. I would put in what I did and what we've just gone over, the first 4 questions under general. So I'm saying yes to headers. I'm just talking about how you group the questions. Okay.
That's fine.
And then then I would have an affordable housing header. Right now, you've got 2. You've got general and design, and there's only one question under general, and everything else is under design.
I'll cut my other questions under general.
Okay, all right. So what I would do is, well, no. I mean, I'm looking at what you.
Yeah, the other version had more under general, but
Okay, all right. Well, anyway, I would just propose 3 headings. You know, the general views, the affordable housing, and then the design elements. Now I'm mindful of our 2 big objectives. I don't think we have to have exquisite concordance here, because they're all tracking back to the objectives. But then you group them so that people, again, you know, as you say, they kind of know what we're talking about, and you would have some kind of intro, I take it, for each of the header sections, right? Okay.
But why wouldn't we include the affordable housing under the general design elements? I mean, to me, that is the general design. I mean, that's the major general design element. Why would we separate that out?
In my mind, design are the DEMPE questions. What kind of amenities do you want to see? How do you want this thing to look? You know, that's kind of where I'm coming from. And then the height and the density are design questions around how big of a building do you want? How big of a building will you tolerate? And then what's in the building? Those are, for me, the design things.
they're absolutely related to the affordable housing. I mean, I actually agree with Lisa on this, that I think that everything from, I agree with you, Bruce, that I think we can group a bunch of things of the broad questions, 1 through 4, under general views. I mean, 4 is a nice logical capper for the general views, saying, okay, whatever happens is going to have ancillary effects, blah blah blah, and then everything 5 on goes under design elements, and then demographics.
I've got no dog in this fight particularly. I mean, that's good.
And just, I have seen, and the reason why too, I think that I've looked at our RFPs, and affordable housing is like a design element. I mean, it's just like how much percentage of housing. I think there's a community that wanted like a certain percentage that got placed under there. I just see all of that as part of the design element of the site.
I'm good with it.
I think we have a big agreement here. So we're closing in on, we only 2 minutes to go before we've done a 3-hour meeting here. So
So the last thing though is the background section. Now, Bruce, did you look at my redraft on that?
I think I did. What I did was just put stuff in a Q&A format, Lisa, so that I'll go back and look at yours and see what the differences are in the language. I don't have that exactly in mind. My only difference between what I had submitted before was that I put this in a Q&A thing so people can go boom, 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 and it's easy for them to manage. Again, if they're looking at something like this on their phone and it's just straight text, I'm concerned that they won't read it or whatever, they'll get lost.
and the same arguments that goes for headers in the survey itself goes for headers in the, it would seem to me goes for headers in the backgrounder. So
Yeah.
okay, we're all holding our breath here.
I mean, okay, so I like my redraft, but I can add, I mean, can we go through and add, like, say, what's the property in question? So, like I say, in January 2018, after conducting blah, 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 ANC 34G released a report. I mean, just look at my version. And maybe Bruce, see if you could add your headers to it.
Yeah, okay. So just so that I'm clear, the number 5 version that you sent out, right, over the weekend has the very latest, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can, let me just say yes. I'll take a look at it and make it work.
Okay.
Okay.
You want me to do an edit of it too, Bruce? I'm happy to.
Okay, sure. And if any issues come up, we'll email each other, we'll figure it out. I mean, I'm happy to make it work.
So between the 3 of us, we have got to get this ready for Monday. I mean, our Monday. We've got to get this to the commissioners. So between who wants to take the lead? I don't mind trying to do it. With combining what we talked about tonight.
I'm perfectly happy to do it and give it to you by the end of the day tomorrow.
Okay. And then Peter, are you going to be able to, like, if we get it from Bruce tomorrow, we all look at it and start tweaking and making sure we get it 100% and send it to the commissioners, hopefully by Friday?
But so I understand this, Lisa. Do you expect to field test it after we show it to the commissioners or before we show it to the commissioners?
After. We got to vote on it. We got to give them an opportunity to vote and ask questions. And yeah.
But we'll tell them, of course, that we're going to test it based on their concurrence with the draft, and we'll come back with feedback, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm good with that.
Okay.
On the field test, we don't have to talk about it right now, but Steve, Susan, and Anna all they gave ideas about how to do that. And it's every commissioner select 5 people to develop a pool, and we do a short evaluation questionnaire that goes with the survey that the testers are taking, and they evaluate each question based on 3 to 5 different criteria. And then we look at those responses and boom. And if we need to supplement that with some kind of focus group with these people to get in greater depth, we could do that, but we do an evaluation form.
Yeah. Okay.
Ideally, we all select people, no disrespect towards the folks on the line, who haven't been steeped in this.
Definitely.
Just the folks out there, the unwashed, if you will.
Want to have technique like pick 5 neighbors who you haven't talked to. Yeah, I mean, people who have not been in the debate.
And I've had some people who, in my single member districts, I've talked a lot about the Civic Corps and my weekly newsletter and so forth, who've come to me to say they'd like to be in, just a few people, they like to be in the test group, and I don't even know them. I mean, they're not in any of these conversations.
Yeah.
So that would be it. We do 5 times 7, 35. We do the evaluation form. We run it for whatever, 3 or 4 days, a week, whatever it has to be. We evaluate it, and then we amend.
That sounds good.
Okay, let's end this before you all collapse.
Let's, before we go, Andrea has her hand up.
I'm sorry, this is a little old news-ish, but now that I'm sort of reeling from the news that the configuration has changed, in my world. Well, I knew nothing. That the community center and the library will be combined in a building. And
We
so,
don't know that, Andrea.
well, it seemed clear from what Ron said that was the case.
No, I don't think so.
I do. What do you say, Ron?
I'm sorry, I'm eating a sandwich.
Okay.
The sketch that we did lined up the community center and library along Northampton, where their lower bulk would be less obtrusive on the houses across the street. So they're not in one building, but they're, along Northampton Street, and an apartment building might be located on McKinley, where it would look at its taller bulk would look at commercial in the short term and probably another multifamily building in the long term.
Okay, but folks,
that's the way we.
That was Ward 3 vision sketch.
That's the way Ward 3 vision sketched it out.
Right.
That's what I was referring to.
Oh, okay. But I have heard that DCPL is planning to co-locate the rec center, the community center and the library. And somehow it didn't occur to me that would mean that there would be a separate building with the apartments. I guess
what I've heard is that they like the idea of locating the 2 facilities next to each other so that they can share some of the meeting rooms and that sort of thing. That's all I've heard.
You're saying next to each other, not one on top of the other.
That's what I said, but I'm not sure that's what they mean. I can't tell you that. I'm
disappointed that Chevy Chase Voice had a question in there about the desirability of co-locating various things, and I'm a little sorry that you all didn't choose it, because it was a big question in the community back in 2018. Of course, there wasn't the question of housing at the time, but people had strong feelings. So just throwing that out there. I know you're not going to go back and retrieve a question, but anyway, it's a thing, because like for seniors, if the community center is above the library, given the record of maintaining elevators and such, then there may be people who use the community center won't be able to access it when the elevators break down. Just saying. Okay, I'll wave goodnight now. Thank you.
And Cal?
I just want to say, you know, that's one group vision. Again, I want to emphasize that. That's not a governmental vision. That's not any of that. That's not even a full community vision. It's one idea. So we're far away from knowing exactly how these buildings are going to be configured.
Well, oh, sorry. Oh, criminy, sorry. Oh, that's not me. Okay. Sorry, that's why it's worth asking. I'm sorry, that's why it's worth asking if it's not set in stone. Okay, now I really am gonna shut.
Okay. So just to conclude, thank you all for coming. And I just want to give a complete shout out to the members of the community that show up. It's pretty much the ones of you all that are on here right now, for hanging in there with us. I was thinking throughout this call tonight how we have so much discord, especially on the listserv, where you really don't have an opportunity to exchange ideas and communicate and come to some middle ground. But I hope people do go back and watch these tapes, because you all come from various different perspectives, and you guys have really lended a lot, to this discussion. And you have influence. There's a lot of times where I hear people say, oh, well, they're not going to change their minds. They're not going to do this. You guys have definitely influenced this entire process. So as you talk about the ANC and the commissioners and where we have come, please keep that in mind. Thank you. I'll end on that. Thank you, guys.
Hey, Lisa, one just little shout out to Steve, Susan, and Anna, who have also been helpful.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and they, no,
Wow,
above.
Yeah.
it was a good meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, I kind of include them when I say, the ones on. I mean,
Oh no,
Steve
I know. I
with us through like day one. So definitely, yes, we can separate them and make sure they know how much we appreciate their expertise as well.
Turn off.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
All right, turn off the record, Lisa. Mine isn't doing it. It says you're the host now.